Let's talk about our recipes when we talk about multi-sub project modular approach. Hello everyone, this is Ali Reza. Welcome to the Mentor Code Lab. When you have a single mod and that mod is responsible of doing everything, things are easy. You will have a sort of game mechanic in your mind and you will start planning your mod based on that game mechanic. For example, you will have a machine called cast press. This machine should generate your casts and then you will put the casts inside another machine called the smeltery and then put different things inside the smeltery and generate many of your ingredients. And these ingredients will be used for different sections of your mod, like the tools, like the armor, or many changes inside vanilla recipes, or even some of your mod recipes. Then you will have another game mechanic. For example, I didn't put it here. You will have a pulverizer that creates the dusts. You will put the dusts inside alloy mixer. Alloy mixer will generate the alloy dust for you. Then you will put the alloy dust inside oven and you get the alloys, and these alloys will be used for crafting cables. When you break your mod into modular sections, now you have a problem. If you recall, our base mod in previous videos were created. However, we don't have any of these machines. We don't have cast press, smeltery, pulverizer, alloy mixer, or oven. And if we don't have these guys, then the question is, how should we now handle the generation of different ingredients? If we don't have cast press and we don't have the ability to create casts, then we don't have the ability to create any of these ingredients here. And if we can't create these ingredients, we can't do anything about our other recipes. And this can become a problem. Now we need to solve this problem. Of course, if we don't have machines, the only way that we have in vanilla mechanics are stone cutting, smelting, or blasting, and then shaped or shapeless recipes. We don't have anything else there. We have a smithing, but nothing else. So we have to do a combination of these mechanics and convert the whole game mechanic to create our ingredients and cover the scenario that someone is not installing machines and just wants to play with something else. For example, we'll have the base and then ores and then play the game, nothing else. Or he may add the cables or I don't know, tools. And as you see, lots of these are not having the machines here. In those scenarios, we have to create a way so that the guy can generate these casts, utilize the casts to generate other ingredients. We should have a way to generate the dusts and alloy dusts and generate the alloys. Now, when your mod is a big one, things will become complex. Without having a guide, you will be completely confused. One of the guides is exactly what you have seen here using the draw.io, and you can use it wherever you want, however you want. The other way is to use sheets and, for example, Excel sheets here. As you see, I have added every item that did not have a recipe in our previous base mod integration. Then I sit down and figured how can I use the game mechanics to change stuff. For example, you see that I use stone cutters, I use shaped or shapeless, and I use even blasting to convert parts that were using machines into parts that are now using vanilla mechanics. For example, these gems were supposed to use gem cleaning machine or gem cleaner. Without having the machine, I can utilize stone cutting to cut around the stone and take the gem out. And I will talk about some concept in a few minutes, but as you see, as I move forward and add some recipes, I put this green color near it, and you see that some of them now has red color, means that I did not provide any recipe for gemcast because gemcast was supposed to be used inside the smeltery to convert the gem block into the gem. And now I'm using this mechanic, so this can't be used. And if I don't use it in any shape, then why should I provide a recipe for it? And same for ingots and nuggets, plates, because I'm using shaped recipes to generate the plates, and then the rods, I'm using shaped recipes to create the rods. The wood variant for the ingot and pickaxe is not being used inside the base anymore. That being said, other than those few, you see that everything else has been added by recipe. Now, here is another question. If I'm providing a shaped, shapeless, or stone cutting, or whatever recipe into the base, why should someone bother himself to add machines to the game and deal with machines and add an extra layer of processing game mechanic? There are two different reasons. The first reason is that some people like to play with machines. Some of them really like machinery and have fun playing with machines. The other reason is that some people prefer to have automation. Now, think about it. We don't have a stone cutting automation in vanilla, but for shape and shapeless recipes, now we have crafters and we can use them. And other than few dusts and stones, others are using either blasting or shaped or shapeless crafting, and those can be automated. So automation is okay, and some people may not like to play machines. Then how can I convince them to use machine? The best way is to force them, honestly. If someone adds machines, some of these recipes will become much cheaper. For example, the gems in stone cutting is one-to-one relation. So you add one raw citrine, you get one citrine out. However, if you use gem cleaner, this will become 1 to 3. So you will add one raw citrine into the machine, you get 3 citrines out. Another example are rods. For rods, as you can see, I changed the recipe. It's not exactly this. The bottom line is using 3 ingredients. 5 ingredients will be used and it will give out only 3 rods. So you are missing 2 ingots. However, if you use machines, for each 1 ingot, you will get 1 rod. Well, these 2 can be ignored. However, when we go into the plates and reinforced plates, for plates, in both cases, we are using 4 ingredients. This time we are using a shaped recipe, but when you are using a smeltery, you will use 4 ingots and give you 1 plate. However, for reinforced plates, and remember, for armor, we need to use reinforced plates. If you use a machine in the name of a smeltery, you will have 4 plates being used to get 1 reinforced plate. However, this time you will need 9 plates to get 1 reinforced plate. And keep in mind that, for example, the helmet will use 6 reinforced, and now each reinforced, let me do it this way, 6 reinforced, and now each reinforced is now using 9 plates, and each plate is using 4 ingots, for example, a gem. Now the total value will be the multiplication of these, so 6 multiplied by 9 multiplied by 4 means that you will have to collect 216 sapphires, for example, to get a helmet, a sapphire helmet, and this is almost equivalent of 3.5 stack. That's a lot. However, if you use machinery, now you will use 6 reinforced, but for the reinforced, you will use 4 plates, and for each plate, you will use 4 ingots. Okay, now the total value here will be 6 multiplied by 4 multiplied by 4 as 96. However, for gems in specialty, it will be this divided by 3, because for each raw item, we will get 3 gems, and then divided by 64, it means half a stack of raw citrine. Basically, in this scenario, you will have to find 216 blocks of citrine, and in this case, you only need to find 32 blocks of citrine. And that's the difference between using machines and not using machines. So a simple math will convince players that if they want the OP armors that are produced by my mod, it's better to use machines, you know? Now that we have figured everything out, the only thing remaining is to sit back and put everything inside your recipes. Now take note, this recipe provider became big, 1,300 lines of code. If you compare it to the previous version that was at the end of the previous video, I think it had, I don't know, 200, 500 lines of code. So it at least doubled the amount. Also, now we have a helper method here, and maybe I will cut it and move it to a library. I don't know, maybe a registers library. I'm not sure. But what is the use case for this? If you take a look at our blasting, you will notice that sometimes I prefer to use tags. For example, here I'm sending in any planks to be blasted, and I want to get raw rubber out of it. So normally vanilla is not providing any way for it, because as you see, offer blasting is accepting a list of item convertible as inputs. No tags there. So how can we find the way around it? Just middle mouse click on offer blasting and open the source, and you'll see that it is calling this line. This offer multiple option for blasting with the blasting recipe, and then it is sending in the inputs. Immediately you see the method call here. It is using a serializer, a recipe factory, and then inputs, and then the rest of the stuff. Now you can see the code. It is looping through inputs, and then it is adding a cooking recipe JSON builder.create, and the only time that is using this item convertible is just here, ingredient of item here, and then for criterion and then the name. So the main problem here is this guy here, because the rest, criterion has item is actually a string. You can use any string, and here the get item path is again a string, and you can use any string there. In other words, if we can figure this one out, then we can convert this method into a helper method and utilize it. And that's exactly what I did. So I just created a similar method that accepts a registries, exporter, the provider, then the category, and here instead of the inputs, I'm using tag, and the rest are almost similar to the previous helper method method that I showed you. And finally, I use ingredient from tag, and then the rest is just a copy. Here we are using create, and instead of ingredient.of item, now I'm using from tag, and the rest is just history. We are using our conditions from tag here, and I'm sending in the criterion as a string, and then I'm adding a suffix for the rest of the stuff. Now this raw robber needs to be changed because basically get item path from this guy is a little bit not convenient, and I think it's output, so I just need to change it to output, and that would work. And that's it basically. Finally, we have a method that we can use blasting, but instead of sending in a list of ingredients, we can just use a tag, and that was a very critical thing to handle. One last thing, if you notice, now I moved my smithings to use the Datagen because honestly sometimes Minecraft is changing how it is handling the Datagen and JSON files. So instead of having my recipes sitting down under data as a JSON, I moved them into Datagen, and now I'm happily using Datagen to create these. However, we had a conflict because when I was adding the shapeless recipes, or was it shapeless recipes, I was using this mechanic for a cast with the ingredient. I was getting the head. I can do it for many things like copper, like I don't know, other stuff, but for the enderite and for the netherite, I'm using smithing now because honestly, I'm changing vanilla recipe for the armors. So the netherite armor is not using a smithing anymore. It is heavily using reinforced netherite plates. Yes, it became really hard to get netherite, but if you want enderite, you have to have netherite. So that's that. And here's the thing. If I'm removing smithing recipes for netherite, then I want to use smithing recipes to get the netherite heads, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. So for example, if we take a look at the smithing for enderite, I'm using the netherite head, and then I'm getting the enderite head out of it. So basically you put the netherite head in with a template with an enderite ingot, and you get the enderite head out. The same thing is happening for the netherite, and I'm covering the head tools right now. I'm not covering armor here because armor is totally a different story. But if you want enderite tools, for example, then yes, you need to have the netherite heads, and netherite heads are using a smithing, and the whole thing is changed. So when I have this mechanic here, of course, I don't need to have a similar recipe as a shaped recipe that is bypassing that mechanic. And that is why I commented this section out, because I was just working like a machine, cheating my way with a bunch of copy pastes. And then I noticed that, hey, I have smithing recipes, so I shouldn't have shapeless recipes. And this is why you need to be careful when you are dealing with this complex game mechanic to cover the base. One last thing to talk about. Now, we are providing lots of recipes here for our cast, for our ingredients, for our gear, for our head, and everything else. Actually, here's the question. What will happen if the guy or the girl as a player installs machines? Now, inside machines, we will have ultra IO underline machine under data and then recipe for our recipes. However, we need to nullify the recipes that we have for ultra IO base. In other words, either we have to use Datagen or we have to do this. Although the machina is not added to the Gradle project, as you see, I only have commands on the base, but under source resources, you will have a package called data, and under here, now you need to mimic this ultra IO base. So new directory ultra IO base, and here we will have the recipe, and finally, we can just copy paste lots of these JSON files that were generated before into the ones that are sitting under machina, and then convert those JSONs to produce Minecraft Air. Basically, when you change the result, for example here, the result will become Minecraft Air. You are nullifying that recipe. And this is how you can override your own recipes inside another submodule, so that when the player installs machina, he will override the recipes from the base, and the base recipes will be nullified, and now the player has to use machina. We will talk about it when I'm writing the code for machina. In the next video, I will come back and talk about how you can make dependencies between your submodules, as you see. And one thing that I will talk about is this command submodule, because I already added the command submodule, and then when I was writing the code for the command submodule, I noticed that I was using a list of strings for the names of the blocks, and I changed that a little bit, and we will talk about that in the next video. And then at the same time, we will talk about Maven local and directly consuming a jar file inside inside your hard drive to make dependencies and work with dependencies, and that will nullify the need for publishing your
اگر از
modules
این ویدیوها
into
لذت
something
بردی
like
و تمایل
modules
به دیدن
before being
آموزش‌های
able to
بیشتری
use it.
داشتی،
Stay tuned for
ویدیوها
the
رو
next
لایک
video.
کن،
If you
دوستانتو به
like
این
these
کانال
videos,
معرفی
please
کن، لطفاً
subscribe to
یادت
the
نره که
channel, hit
سابسکرایب
the
کنی،
like
دکمه
button,
زنگوله رو
and
روشن
turn
کنی
on that
تا وقتی
bell
برات
so
ویدیو
that when
آپلود
I
میکنم
publish a new
خبردار بشی.
video,
موفق
you
باشید،
will
خدا
get
نگهدار.
informed. Have fun, everyone. Bye.